I'll tell you, in my third year of law school at UVA, the placement office noticed that I had never interviewed for a job. They were concerned about me, so the head of the placement office called me in to see what was happening, and she asked me if I had any plans after graduation. And I said, yes, I have a job. And I could see her eyes brighten because I would help her statistics. And she asked me where my job was, and I said I would be with Penny Press. And I saw her write in her book, Penny, comma, Press, comma,
Oh, right.
for the rest of the law firm's name. I had to tell her that this was a Crossword magazine company. Would have nothing to do with law.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Ryan, president of the University of Virginia, and I'd like to welcome all of you to another episode of Inside UVA. This podcast is a chance for me to speak with some of the amazing people at the university and to learn more about what they do and who they are. My hope is that listeners will ultimately have a better understanding of how UVA works and a deeper appreciation of the remarkably talented and dedicated people who make UVA the institution it is, including our alumni. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Will Shortz, a UVA law alum, the editor of the New York Times Crossword, and NPR's Puzzle Master. Will sold his first puzzle at age 14 and earned a one-of-a-kind degree in Enigmatology from Indiana University. He has been with the New York Times for over 30 years. He's been the subject of a popular documentary, Wordplay, founded the American Crossword Puzzle Tournament, and has authored or edited more than 750 books of crosswords, Sudoku, and other puzzles. Will is also an avid table tennis player and co-founded the Westchester Table Tennis Center. Will, it is a real pleasure. Thank you for joining us today.
Nice to talk to you, Jim.
So it is really wonderful to have you here. I know you've recently been through a challenging time with your health, and I'm sure our listeners are glad to hear from you. And I'm just curious how you're feeling these days and what you've been up to lately.
As you probably know, I had a stroke in February, and in my case, it was on the right side of my brain, which affected the left side of my body. So I really could not do anything with my left arm or leg. They were incapacitated. But I've done rehab, and I continue to do rehab every single day. And now I'm walking again. I've regained some functionality with my left arm. I've been doing puzzles again on NPR since April. And next week, I'm about to restart editing the New York Times crossword. Fortunately, my brain was basically unaffected by the stroke, so I've been making puzzles like crazy for the last few months.
Oh, that's great. I'm really glad to hear that. So let's step back and go back to the beginning. Where were you raised, and when did you become interested in puzzles?
Well, I grew up on an Arabian horse farm in Indiana. My mother was a writer, and I started making puzzles when I was very young. I'm not sure why, but my mom showed me how to submit my puzzles for publication. So that's what I did. As you mentioned earlier, I sold my first puzzle when I was 14. I became a regular contributor to Dell Puzzle magazines when I was 16. I used to joke as a kid when I loved puzzles so much that I would major in puzzles when I got to college, never imagining that I could actually do this.
Yeah, so how did you pull that off? How did you come up with the major in enigmatology? And am I right that you are the only person to ever receive a degree in that field?
Yes. And if there were another, I'm sure I would have heard about it. Indiana has this innovative program. I'm told there are only about a dozen schools in the country that have it, where you can literally major in anything if you're accepted into this program, the individualized major program. So I devised an entire curriculum in puzzles, such as one of my first courses in my major was crossword puzzles, the construction of crosswords. And every few weeks, I would go into my professor's office. I found a professor in the English department who would work with me, and I would bring in a puzzle for him to solve. I would sit next to him as he did it and then critiqued it, and that's how I made my first crosswords. I also studied the history of word puzzles, creation of mathematical puzzles, creation of logic puzzles. I took a course on crossword magazines, and my thesis was on the history of American word puzzles before 1860.
So when was the first crossword puzzle?
The first one was in December 21, 1913, in an old newspaper, the New York World. And it was immediate success. It became a weekly feature of the World. And then in 1924, there were two young graduates of Columbia Journalism School, Simon and Schuster, and they were interested in starting a publishing firm. One of them had an aunt who is a big fan of the crosswords that were running in the world. So they rushed a collection of crossword puzzles into print in April 1924. It was the world's first crossword book, and it not only launched a craze, it launched the firm of Simon and Schuster. Their first success was with a crossword puzzle book. They were actually embarrassed by having their first book be crosswords because they wanted to be a literary publishing house, thought that something as frivolous as crosswords would reflect poorly on their firm. But after it was a runaway success, they were happy to start putting their names on the book.
So, what brought you to law school? I mean, you did this degree focused on puzzles. Connect the dots for me. What then brought you to UVA Law?
Well, a couple of things. My older brother is a lawyer. I didn't think I could have a career in puzzles. I thought I would die of poverty. So my idea was that I would practice law for 10 years and then go do what I really wanted to do, which was puzzles. I'll tell you a couple things during my summer just before law school and then during law school. I worked for Penny Press puzzle magazines in Connecticut as an intern, and that allowed me to see how I could have a career in puzzles. I wouldn't have to do it from making them, which is very hard. Usually puzzles don't pay so well, but
Right.
I could have a job editing puzzles. I'll tell you, in my third year of law school at UVA, the placement office noticed that I had never interviewed for a job, and they were concerned about me. So the head of the placement office called me in to see what was happening, and she asked me if I had any plans after graduation. And I said, yes, I have a job. And I could see her eyes brighten because I would help her statistics. And she asked me where my job was, and I said I would be with Penny Press. And I saw her write in her book, Penny, comma, Press, comma,
Oh, right.
for the rest of the law firm's name. I had to tell her that this was a crossword magazine company. Would have nothing to do with law.
And so you never practiced at all.
No, never took the bar exam or practiced. I went right into puzzles. But I don't regret my years at UVA for
Yeah.
several reasons. First of all, UVA is a wonderful place to be. And my last semester at UVA, I was blessed to live on the range, which was a
Oh,
great
yeah.
experience. And actually, law school is great training for the mind. It teaches you to take complex problems and issues and separate them into their threads and deal with each one at a time. It made me a better thinker, so I'm very happy to have a law degree from UVA.
Well, we're glad to count you as an alum. And you came back not too long ago to give the commencement address at the law school, if I'm not mistaken.
I did. Yeah, that was great. I turned it into a game also, where I gave quotes from Thomas Jefferson and I left off the ends of them. And I gave different possibilities at how he might have ended the statements. So everyone at the graduation ceremony would take a guess at which way he ended the sentence. And of course, each one had a little moral for life.
Mm.
So it was not only fun to play, I think, but it also they had a point to it.
Right. And how did the audience do in guessing?
Well, everyone had fun. Yeah, it was a good time.
So, how did you land the job at the New York Times? And you've been there quite a while.
Yeah, well, I worked for Penny Press for a short while after I graduated from UVA, and then I became an editor and eventually the editor of Games magazine. But I left there in 1993 and started at the Times when my predecessor, Eugene T. Maleska, died, so the position became open and I applied for it. I think I was the natural person for the job because of my background. I have, as you mentioned, founded the American Crossword Puzzle Tournament and have been selling puzzles for years and years. I think they saw that there would be a revolution in publishing this was in 1993.
Mhm.
Thought they foresaw the change in publishing that would be moving toward digital. It would help to have a younger person. I was 37 years younger than my predecessor, and I was one of the few people who got along well with both the older generation of puzzle makers and the younger ones from my years at Games.
How has the digital era changed the way people do puzzles?
Wow, that's a good question. It's really changed crosswords quite a lot and for the better, I think. When I started at the Times in 1993, the puzzles were solved only on paper. And I remember once we started adding and making the puzzles available digitally, occasionally there would be a puzzle with a crazy theme that we couldn't present digitally. It would appear only in print. So for that day online, we'd do a past puzzle. which would infuriate people who had paid, the subscription to get the
Right.
puzzle digitally. Now there's more people probably solve the puzzles digitally than they do in the paper. So we're very aware of that, and we try to make the solving experience online at least as good, if not better, online than solving on paper.
And there has been an explosion of puzzles connected to the New York Times lately. You think about Wordle, Connections, Spelling Bee, the mini crossword. And are you involved in any of those?
Well, I'm the person who invented Spelling Bee. I don't oversee that in digitally, but I'm proud of that. The New York Times purchased Wordle from Josh Wardle, who invented that. So I wasn't involved in that, but I play it every day. Wordle is so popular, partly because it's so short, it
Right.
just takes a minute or two. Nowadays, life, I think, is so fast paced. It's very hard to carve out 30 minutes of your day to do maybe the crossword. Whereas Wordle just takes a couple of minutes and then you can share your result with your friends. That's made it popular. In the old days, I found when you're talking with somebody new, a common question that would come in, what movies have you seen lately? Nowadays, I find we often ask each other, how did you do on Wordle today?
That's so true. And I do think that the sharing feature encourages people to keep at it. I'm on a text chain with my extended family, and everyone reports their Wordle scores and how long it took them to do the mini crossword. And it's a wonderful way of staying connected.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I was going to ask you about feedback from people who are doing the puzzle. My guess is you have gotten some interesting emails over the years about objection to a particular clue or comment on puzzles. Am I right in thinking that? Do you get a lot of feedback?
Well, there's a couple answers to that. The answer is yes. The mail used to come to me personally, and I was encouraged to respond to everyone. But nowadays, there are a number of crossword forums online that people can write their comments about the puzzle, anything they liked or didn't like. So most of people's comments go there rather than to me personally now. But I'll tell you, back in the 1990s, there was a woman on Long Island who wrote me that her mother had recently died just a couple of days ago, and they were about to bury her. And her mother was a big fan of the New York Times crossword. And she wondered if it would be possible for us to get the following Sunday's New York Times Magazine, which they could bury with her in the funeral. That would be a way for her mother to be happy through eternity. And actually, a kind of a gratifying story. A woman wrote me that she had been solving the New York Times crossword for years. She had brain surgery and she was worried about her ability to solve the Times crossword afterward. So as soon as she regained consciousness, she asked for a copy of the New York Times crossword, which she was able to do.
Hmm.
So she knew she had come through the surgery
Oh,
successful.
that's a great story. So, of all of the various puzzles you've been involved in creating, do you have a favorite, or is there a favorite that you like to participate in?
Gotcha. Well, my favorite kinds of puzzles to solve are cryptic crosswords in the British style. But honestly, I will like really any kind of puzzle, whether it's mathematical, logical, or a word puzzle of any sort. I play the New York Times' Wordle and Strands every day. I'm not involved in creating those. And I direct the program for the National Puzzlers League convention every year. And I take part in all of those. And I direct the American Crossword Puzzle Tournament. So I like any challenging puzzle.
And what is it about puzzles that you find so alluring? And why do you think people come back to them over and over again?
Yeah, well, every kind of puzzle has its own appeal. For crosswords, it's the love of language, this English language that we share. I think English has a more vocabulary than any other language in the world. And we incorporate all of that into our crosswords, as well as everything in life, things you learn in school from geography to and history up to modern things like TV, movies, and sports and music. Everything can appear in crosswords. So it's an all-round test of your brain. I think as humans, we like to solve mysteries. If you think about it, every puzzle is a little mystery which we're solving. And the biggest thing is, I think it gives us a sense of empowerment. Most of the problems that we have in everyday life, we just muddle through and do the best we can. And at the end, we don't know if we've gotten the best solution or not. We've just coped with life. With a crossword or a Sudoku or some other kind of puzzle, We have seen the process through literally from square one to the end. And when you fill in that last square, you feel a rush. It makes you
Right.
feel great, like you're in control of life. And that's what I think is great about puzzle solving.
Yeah, that's a great description. It is very satisfying. So tell me a little bit about your experience with the documentary Wordplay. What was that like?
Well, it was in the fall of 2004 that a filmmaker, Patrick Creedon in California, called me and asked if I would be willing to be part of a documentary about crosswords. I thought maybe, 150 people would watch the result on YouTube once it was done, but I thought, why not? Sure, I'll do it. And they filmed at the 2005 American Crossword Puzzle Tournament and did a lot of interviewing with me and my colleagues. The film debuted or came out in 2006 at the Sundance Film Festival, where it was a hit, picked up by a distributor, and was released in theaters in 2006 and became one of the 25 highest grossing documentaries of all time. It was a great film for anyone who hasn't seen it. I'll just say whether you like crosswords or not, it's a fantastic film. It has something at the end. I don't know, it still brings tears to my eyes every time I rewatch the film.
So, do you ever have the equivalent of writer's block when you're creating a puzzle?
Not really. I'm always thinking of puzzle ideas. I'd say I have a playful mind.
Mm.
And when I'm lying in bed, going to sleep at night, I will play around with ideas in my head.
Huh.
Sometimes come up with my best ideas that way. It's like being a writer. There's always something new to be written about. For a puzzle maker, there's always a new twist on something or a new idea that you can make a puzzle around.
And do you have, looking back over your career, a all-time favorite puzzle that you've created?
Yeah, my all-time favorite puzzle is something called the equation analysis test, which ran in the May-June to the 1981 Games magazine. And the way it worked was I took equations like 7 equals W of the AW, and those letters were the initials of the words that would complete the equation. So 7 equals wonders of the ancient world. And 5 might equal S, which would be the five senses, and so on. Or 31 might be F at BR, which would be flavors at Baskin Robbins. You have these equations you have to solve. So the puzzle appeared in Games magazine, and apparently people started liking it and photocopying it with taking away the where it originally appeared and giving it to their friends. So later in 1981, people started submitting my own puzzle back to me at Games magazine, saying they'd seen this cool puzzle running around and would I be interested in running it.
And remind me, when did you start as a puzzle master on NPR, and how do you like that compared to the other aspects of your work?
Yeah, so I started there in 1987 on a program called Weekend Edition Sunday. The original host was Susan Stamberg, who was a longtime NPR presenter. Her idea was that this 2 hour program on Sunday morning should be the radio equivalent of a Sunday newspaper. It would have news and
Right.
features and so on. So we all know one of the most popular features of a Sunday newspaper is the crossword. She wanted a puzzle somehow in the show. So I thought about what kind of puzzle would work. Obviously, it couldn't be a crossword because that requires writing. And it can't be something that's very hard because you'd have long periods of silence on the radio, which you
Right.
can't have.
Right.
So I came up with this format where I give quick word teasers. Originally, it was just to Susan because she's a puzzle solver and a lively person herself. Later, Leanne Hansen became host of the show, who she also likes puzzles, and she had the idea to bring in listeners into the show. So really, Leanne was in an impossible position. If she answered all my puzzles quickly, then she was a smart ass. And if she couldn't answer my puzzles, then she was a
Right.
dumbass.
That's a lot of pressure.
But nowadays, the listeners are part of the show. So I love it because I love making puzzles. And every week I make an original puzzle for the radio.
So let's talk about table tennis. How long have you been playing, and when did you first get interested in it?
Well, I grew up in Indiana, and my family had a ping pong table in our rec room. So I grew up playing ping pong as a kid. I have a whole bunch of trophies from high school. And so I played almost my whole life. Stopped for 15 years and then picked up the game again in 2001 and became progressively obsessed with it. playing 2 times a week and then 3 times and then 4 times and then eventually 7 times a week. And then my best friend came from Barbados in around 2006. We started going to table tennis clubs together, and we decided to start our own club, which is in my hometown of Pleasantville, New York. We're the Westchester Table Tennis Center. We are the second largest table tennis facility in the country, where we have 30 tables. We're open until 10 o'clock every night. And we have the largest monthly table tennis tournament in the country, where we offer $8,000 in prizes every month. So I am obsessed with the game. I'm the only person ever to play at a club in all 50 US states. I
No
played in
kidding.
44 countries so far. In 2012, I decided I was going to play table tennis every single day. And I had a streak that went for 11 years and 4 months until I had a stroke earlier this year.
Holy cow.
So I played 4,141 days in a row. Now that I'm recovering from my stroke, I am playing table tennis again, but I'm not going to do the streak. I'll just play as much as I want.
And are you completely self-taught or did you get coaching along the way?
Yeah, I was self-taught until relatively recently. So a lot of my training now is probably undoing the mistakes that are ingrained in me from before.
Right. And do you see any connection between table tennis and puzzles other than obsessiveness?
Yeah, there's surprisingly, they are related. First of all, they're both brain games. Obviously, puzzle solving is a brain game,
Yeah.
but table tennis is too, because you're, first of all, training your body to perform at its best. And it's a very fast-paced game with all kinds of spins and strategies. So you're using your brain all the time. Also, I play table tennis for the same reason that most people do crosswords and puzzles. With a crossword or a puzzle, it's a diversion from life. If there's anything that's worrying you in life, a crossword will help distract you. And when you're done with the puzzle, you feel great and you're ready to go back to face everything else in life. In my case, since I do puzzles for a living, they don't give me that same sense of relaxation. Table tennis is how I clear my mind at night.
Well, Will, I want to thank you very much for taking the time. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you. And I have to say, you made my mother very happy. She did the New York Times crossword puzzle every day and was a whiz at the Sunday New York Times puzzle in
Oh, you
particular.
had a good mother. Thanks a lot, Jim. It's been a pleasure.
Inside UVA is a production of WTJU 91.1 FM and the Office of the President at the University of Virginia. Inside UVA is produced by Kokub Rizvi, Benjamin Larson, Mary Gardner McGee, Matt Weber, and Jaden Evans. Special thanks to Maria Jones and Jane Kelly. Our music is Turning to You from Blue Dot Sessions. You can listen and subscribe to Inside UVA on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back soon with another conversation about the life of the university.